Welcome to this explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're going to look at some of the most fascinating artifacts from the 19th century. We are talking about 4 highly detailed, beautifully drawn treasure maps that claim to show the exact location of the lost city of Atlantis. It's a wild story about the birth of civilization, the spread of technology, and how we, as humans, just desperately want to explain the mysteries of our world.
So, what if a map could prove a myth? I mean, when you look at these original printings, the black outlines of the modern-day world are incredibly accurate. They look like perfectly normal, well-made scientific maps, which makes the unbelievable claims drawn right over top of them seem almost real. But, to really understand how these maps came to be, we have to start at the very beginning.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, Plato's original parable.
We're traveling back 2,400 years to Athens to find the very first mention of this famous city, courtesy of an incredibly influential guy named Plato. Just think about the sheer scale of the luxurious, utopian society Plato described. He placed it way out in the Atlantic Ocean, past the Pillars of Hercules. He painted this vivid picture of a massive island civilization built in perfect concentric circles, featuring highly advanced engineering, sophisticated canals, and a colossal palace decorated with golden statues. He even claimed they had a highly advanced military and a navy that basically ruled the seas.
But hey, here's where we need a firm reality check. Most historians agree entirely that Plato was not describing a literal place. In his mind, Atlantis was just a parable. He was using this imaginary society to teach a lesson about utopian governments, human hubris, and the ultimate downfall of mankind. It was a philosophical thought experiment, guys, not a historical record. But the idea of a lost, highly advanced civilization was just too tempting for humanity to let go of.
Which brings us to Section 2, a pseudoscientific revolution.
For centuries, people kept the myth alive. But it really took off during a time when science was rapidly displacing old religious explanations of reality. Picture the 19th century. European explorers and scientists were stumbling upon ancient, lost cities all over the globe. And as they did, they encountered a genuine mystery. How did separated ancient cultures build the exact same pyramids? Scientists noticed that the Egyptians and the Mayans both had pyramids, similar arches, writing systems, and agricultural practices, despite having an entire ocean between them and absolutely no way to communicate. People became desperate for an explanation. They started looking for a mother civilization right in the middle of the new and old worlds to explain this shared knowledge.
You see, the late 1800s found itself in this really awkward middle ground. On one hand, people were throwing off the old ways and embracing the scientific revolution. They were learning about floating continents, fossil records, and empirical evidence. But simultaneously, there was a massive spiritual revolution going on. People wanted to connect the dots of their scientific findings using clairvoyance, seances, and psychic powers. It sounds crazy today, but they genuinely believed these spiritual powers boosted their ability to do real science.
Okay, moving on to Section 3. Inside the Atlantean Utopia.
This totally sets the stage for a Scottish banker turned amateur cartographer named William Scott-Elliot. He uses exact, wild blend of clairvoyance and science to draw those incredibly detailed maps we started with. Just look at the sheer scale of what he envisioned. Scott-Elliot mapped out the City of the Golden Gates, an Atlantean capital that supposedly housed 2 million residents. Leaning fully into the absurdity of it all, he detailed a massive, circular city with, of all things, a highly specific, heart-shaped underwater drinking reservoir. I mean, how romantic, right?
And the sci-fi details he claimed to see through his clairvoyance, they're literally staggering. He wrote that these unique Atlanteans possessed flying battleships powered by etheric plane energy, which was supposedly this mystical, invisible energy completely beyond our physics. They had explosives that released poisonous gas, they rode on sheets of metal, and yet somehow they also engaged in rituals where they drank blood hot from the animal. And get this, he claimed this hyper-advanced civilization existed at its prime a staggering 1 million years ago.
So how exactly do you explain the disappearance of a million-year-old superpower? Well, let's follow his timeline. Scott-Elliot claimed that starting 800,000 years ago, a global ice age catastrophe began ripping through the Earth, causing Atlantis to slowly sink into the sea, breaking apart into smaller islands over time. Finally, he states, a massive global flood finished the job.
In the exact year of that final, total sinking, 9,564 BC. Now this right here is a fascinating tactic known as false precision. Using a hyper-specific year, BC, is a classic way false precision is used to make purely fictional stories look undeniably factual. I mean, if it has a specific date, it's gotta be real, right?
So, the absolutely crucial point here is understanding exactly what we are looking at. It's pseudoscience. William Scott-Elliot was taking spiritual, clairvoyant revelations and clothing them in sciencey-looking formats, like exquisitely drawn maps and highly specific timelines. He basically used the aesthetics of science to fill in the blanks of mysteries he just couldn't understand. Now we need to shift gears a bit for Section 4, the dark Aryan twist.
We really need to look at why these pseudoscientific fantasies weren't just harmless fun, but actually carried a very dark and dangerous ideology. If we break down the worldview embedded in these maps, we see a deeply disturbing narrative. The myth stated that before Atlantis completely sank, its white inhabitants fled east and west. The implication, and the way this was heavily used at the time, was to explain away the incredible achievements of non-European cultures. It posited that native peoples in the New and Old worlds were primitive and could only have built incredible structures like pyramids because these advanced Atlantean survivors arrived to gift them culture, eventually becoming what they termed the superior Aryan race.
And unfortunately, this racist pseudo-scientific theory endured well into the 20th century. It is a sobering historical fact that in the 1930s, Heinrich Himmler, the architect of the Holocaust, became completely obsessed with this exact pseudoscience. He actually funded archaeological expeditions searching for proof that the ancestors of the German people were from Atlantis. He used this pseudoscientific theory, built on Plato's old parable, to justify horrific violence and the wiping out of entire races.
Which leads us to our final part, Section 5, a cautionary tale.
After looking at the maps, the myths, and the horrific ways this pseudoscience was weaponized, we have to step back and look at the actual facts. Under the slow, rigorous consensus of actual science and modern archaeology, there is absolutely zero empirical evidence for Atlantis. I absolutely love this perspective from modern archaeology. The human past is interesting enough without making a bunch of stuff up. We just don't need fabricated, clairvoyantly drawn maps to find wonder in the world. The real mysteries of our history, discovered through actual scientific methodology, are endlessly fascinating completely on their own.
And that is exactly what you should take away from this explainer today. Beware the disguise of scientific language and aesthetics. Today, we might not be looking at 19th century maps drawn by a Scottish banker, but we are constantly bombarded by pseudo-documentaries on TV and streaming platforms that co-opt the language of science to tell really compelling lies. They use big words, serious-looking graphics, and confident experts to make fiction feel like undeniable fact.
So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Think about the media you consume, the mysteries you're naturally drawn to, and the explanations that just feel a little too perfect. If a lie is dressed up in the language of science, are you still equipped to spot it today? Stay curious, stay rigorous, and always, always question the map you're being handed.